Anything surprising that, no?
You had a nice time in your
Good? Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. It's always strange to kind of finally finish all of Yontov, and now you got, you don't have anything special greeting to say, you don't have anything to look forward to, you don't have any stress from all the different holidays, and you're just in normal life again, right? But the trick is you take all that vibration and you bring it down to normal life, and you start the cycle again.
When's the next
I guess Hanukkah. Yeah, now we got.
Early this year.
Oh, have we not learned Hanukkah? It's crazy. We'll get to it. There's chapter 6 is going around. I also have a flyer for my teacher Label Wolf's talk that's going to be here. If you like any of this stuff, definitely catch him. He's a lifelong master of this type of material. Teaches it all over the world. He lectures. His tours go to Russia, South Africa, Israel, Europe, America, South America, and he's a lawyer and a psychologist and teaches Kabbalah of this variety. And he'll speak at major conferences. I'll talk to him, and he's in Russia speaking to a world conference of psychologists, and then he's in Argentina speaking to a economic summit somewhere, and then he's doing a Farbrengen at a little synagogue in Brooklyn, and then he's flying to.
He must not be married, doesn't have kids or grandkids, obviously.
You hear that,
He
Label?
must be a bachelor.
I assure you, he has a wonderful wife. He has children all over, some of them serving in the Israeli army, living in Israel, living all the world, teaching in Australia. He's constantly visiting his grandkids in California and in Israel.
Does he sleep?
How do you mean all over?
All over, his grandchildren? Well, he has grandkids in Australia, Israel, and California that I know of. So that's what I meant. So he's really an amazing speaker. This is Monday, November 5th. So a good chance to meet a very inspiring individual. Okay, so we got chapter 6 coming around. Hi. So welcome back to normal life. And an interesting transition. We're going from the discussion we've had of the structure of Nefesh Elokit, of the divine soul, and we're transitioning to now a shorter conversation about the structure of Nefesh Be'amit, the animal soul. Right, so paralleling our move from this very, very lofty times, now we're coming to a mundane time, interesting timing. So just to bring everyone up to speed, and today we're going to be going into chapter 6 of Lessons in Tanya, page 100, if you're at home. Do you know which of those cameras is live right now?
The one this one here.
Right here in the middle. Hi, good. So just to bring us up to speed, chapter 1, we learned about the two types of self-centered person, two types of completely other-centered person, and then about the intermediate person, the Beinoni, which is the focus of our practice. So we're going to be learning how to use our soul to rise to the level of the Beinoni, the intermediate person. And we also learned that we have two souls. One is the other-centered soul, Nefesh Elokit, the godly soul. The other, Nefesh Be'amit, the self-centered soul. Yeah, chapter 2, we started looking at chapter 2, the structure of the Nefesh Elokit. Not the structure, but the reality of it, that it is a spark of godliness. It's an actual spark of God that's within us, that was blown within us. And then in chapter 3, we started looking at its structure. It has how many attributes? 3. Attributes, total. 10. And the main division of the attributes is what? Two types of attributes, they are? Seichel, intellect, and then? Emotional / behavioral, right? And what's the relationship between the intellectual and the behavioral? Is that like the relationship we compare to?
The intellect is the parent.
Parents, and the midot are? Children, exactly. So we have 10 attributes, and they function as parents and children. The intellect of the parents, the emotion The emotional attributes are the children. Chapter 4, I'm losing my chapters here. Yeah, chapter 4, we look at the garments of the soul. How many garments does the soul have? 3 they are.
Thought, speech, and action.
Okay, and like garments, I could take them on, I could put them off, they are external. However, key point, when it comes to the godly soul, the garments of the godly soul, when I'm talking about it perhaps as being other-centered in my thought, speech, and action, or more classically, when we're actually learning Torah or doing mitzvahs, however you want to frame it, those are the garments of the divine soul, and they actually are even higher than the source of our soul. So although they're external, when we sit down here and engage in thinking about our mystical traditions, we are actually creating a garment that elevates us above the source of our soul, above what we can even conceive of. 1, 2, 3, 4, chapter 5, we started looking at Torah study as a particular kind of garment that when I engage with my thought in Torah study and my speech in speaking words of Torah, there's a special unity that happens where I encompass the Torah study and it encompasses me, and I actually internalize it, and at the same time I also use speech, so I'm getting the benefits both of Torah study and of mitzvah, where it's like a physical action, where I'm using my mouth to say it, and the air is creating almost an environment around me, and yet I'm engaging my mind, and I'm absorbing it. So Torah study, very, very special. And that completes our examination of the structure of the second soul, the godly soul. Now we're going to come back and very, very briefly go over the structure of the animal soul. Hi, Joey. And here there's a, did we run the flyers? Here. Thanks. The reason why the conversation is short is because the structure is exactly the same. And as we start in chapter 6, everything in the universe is a mirror of everything else in the universe, right? So if the divine soul has 10 attributes, how many attributes do you suppose the animal soul has? 10, right? If it's divided into 2 categories, what are the 2 categories now of the animal soul? Intellect and emotion, right? And if the divine soul has 3 garments, how many garments do you suppose the animal soul has? 3, right? So the reason it's quick is because there's not that much to review. Everything we've learned about the structure of the divine soul applies to the structure of the animal soul, so you already know it. The difference is context, where the divine soul is doing this. How can I help you? How can I share? How can I be other-centered? How can I connect with the Ein Sof? The animal soul is saying, how can I take care of number 1? Perhaps neutrally. Sometimes we need to. You know, a lion runs into the room, we're all going to run. That's our animal souls at work. Very good, get out of the room. However, sometimes counterproductively. So that's where the balance of this technique comes in, that we're negotiating this conversation between an other-centered soul and a self-centered soul, right? But the structure is the same. So let's start chapter 6. Why don't we start with the Hebrew itself? So page 101, everyone see it? V'hinei ze lumat ze asa Elokim. Go ahead.
The Almighty has created one thing opposite the other. Everything in the realm of holiness has its counterpart in Khalifa. In our context, the animal soul, with its faculties and garments, is a counterpart in Khalifa of the divine soul, with its faculties and garments.
Okay, so klipa, that term you may remember, means the shell or the husk, the sort of external aspect. Right, we'll talk about it a little more later. We've looked at it already, but a shell contains the important piece inside. Same thing in the world. The world has an external reality. That's the shell, the klipa. What he's saying is, God created one thing opposite the other, and very nice. We just finished Sukkot because this is from Ecclesiastes, right? And so, what does that mean? One thing's created opposite the other. It means that everything we look at is a mirror image of something else. In this case, we're talking about holiness and the klipa, or the other side, the non-holy aspect of reality. And we're not saying that, oh, how cool that one of them is created to be like the other, so you can find correspondences. But actually, one is like the other because they're just a negative impression of each other. Right? If you remember old school photography, You took a picture in your camera and the light went inside and it hit film and it made a what? A negative, right? So the light created dark, and so you had a negative of the picture, and you took it and you made a plastic copy of it, and you shone light through it onto a plate. You know more than I do, obviously, right? And you finally got the positive picture again. But if you look at the negative, you know, where there's a sun on the positive, what are you going to have on the negative?
Dark.
Dark. Will it be the same shape? Will it have every detail exactly the same? Does that surprise you? If it's a good camera. Why doesn't it surprise me? Because it's a negative of the positive. It's actually a copy of it, right? If you look at someone's face, there's 2 eyes on the positive. How many eyes will the negative have? 2 eyes, and so on, right? So we're not surprised that a film negative is going to have all the same details down to everything we can possibly see as a positive, because it's a copy, and in fact the purpose of it is to replicate the positive. You know, it's a copy that's not intrinsically necessary. I only need it to recreate the positive. No one looks at the negatives, and unless you're you know, Andy Warhol or someone. Usually the negative is just there to facilitate the positive. It's only there to enable something else. And same thing with the klipa, the physical aspect of the world, or the external aspect of the world. The reason why everything is a mirror image of everything else, holiness versus the other side, is because it really is a duplicate copy, and the whole point of the other side of the world is to be a container for holiness. So it's not by coincidence, it's not even because the Ein Sof wanted to be clever, it really is the same as the negative photography. Of course, it's an exact copy, because the two are mirror images of each other, and the shell is helping the side of holiness actually manifest. So every time we look at these two souls, we're seeing one mirroring the other, the side of holiness and the other side, as we'll learn. Ki kmo, any questions on that? It's an important topic. Ki kmo shenefesh elokit klula me'eser sfirot kedoshot umitlabeshet bishlosha levushim kedoshim.
Just as the divine soul consists of 10 holy faculties which correspond to the 10 supernal sephirot, and is clothed in 3 holy garments, the thought, speech, and action of the Torah and the mitzvot.
So that was chapters 3 and 4 right there, right? You just did chapters 3 and 4 of the animal soul, right? Just like the divine soul has 10 holy faculties, which actually evolve from the supernal sephirot, from Chochmah, Bina, Dat, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet of Atzilus. So the soul of the 10 sephirot of the universe, they become the 10 attributes of my divine soul. Also, the animal soul has those 10 somethings, we haven't named them yet, faculties, right? And also 3 garments, thought, speech, and action of the divine soul. You also have thought, speech, and action of the animal soul because it's the negative copy of it. Kach hanefesh desitra achara miklipot noga hamlubeshet bedam hadam.
So too, the soul of the Sitra Akara, defined further in this chapter, derived from Kilpat Noga, which is clothed in man's blood, as explained in chapter 1. The animal soul is clothed in the blood and thereby animates the body. This soul too.
Yeah. And so another term we'll get to in a moment, Klipa Noga, which we've touched on, I think, and Sitra Achra, which is similar to Klipa. Sitra means side, Achra means other. So the world has holiness, and then it has anything that's not holiness, the other side. We'll get to that a little deeper.
Consists of 10 crowns of impurity, that is, the faculties of
Klipa.
Klipa, called crowns in kabbalistic terminology.
Yeah, so till there. That's Kula Me'eser Kiturin Dim Sa'avuta, just till there. And so this idea that Nefesh Behamit, the animal soul, is actually enclosed in our blood, that feels pretty archaic. That feels pretty medieval or something, right? Your soul is enclosed in your blood. It's kind of spooky, right? But we have an innate sense. The blood is the vitality of the body. There's sort of a certain reality there. I know, the image of somebody, God forbid, losing a lot of blood. Their life is flowing out of them. There is something enlivening about blood. And if we can put aside our sort of modern scientific sensibilities, the Zohar and Kabbalah and the Tanya, they say that's actually the physical medium through which the nefesh bamit encounters the body. And in fact, nefesh elokit, we've been talking about it as if nefesh elokit can actually speak and can actually use my brain and think. It can actually move my hands around. It can't. Nefesh elokit is a spiritual being. It's a godly being, and it can't deal well with physical reality. It can't actually animate a body. So if I want to drive to temple and have breakfast and maybe say a blessing and sit down and learn some Torah and do something good and then go come on Shabbat and pray, I need something that's going to connect nefesh elokit to this physical body. And it's nefesh bamit that does that. Right? If you see anyone physically doing a mitzvah or physically praying or thinking or speaking about Torah, it's not nefesh elokit that's causing the body to do it. It's nefesh bamit that's controlling every process of the body. Nefesh elokit needs to actually enclose within nefesh bamit, and then nefesh bamit drives the physical reality. And that happens through the blood, right? So spiritually, this may be a useful lens to say, my godly soul needs my animal soul in order to connect with the body. And just so I know, the animal soul is connecting to the body first through the blood, and there's a certain spiritual reality to that, even if that's a little bit wild. Yeah? Yeah?
So, does it follow that by doing this mitzvah with your animal soul, you're actually raising your animal soul to a higher level?
Yeah, the question is, because my animal soul is doing the mitzvah, am I raising my animal soul? And that's cutting to, very far forward in the Tanya. That's the whole point of the exercise, is that we're not here to elevate the godly soul. The godly soul is a piece of God. We're here to elevate the animal soul, and it's every descent of the soul is for the sake of a higher ascent. Yes. And then the term we use for the 10 attributes when they are in the animal soul is not 10 attributes. We call them 10 crowns of impurity, right? Again, these very, very, medieval sort of terms, right? But what do we mean? The word crown actually says more than the word impurity, right? Impurity, has some connotations in English that aren't really helpful. It's just not holiness. That's all it needs to mean. Just like any self-centeredness is considered, quote unquote, impure in this context. It doesn't mean that it's a horrible, diabolical thing. It's just not completely one with Ein Sof, right? That's all impurity means in this context. But a crown tells us a lot about how they function. Right, the first idea is that crown refers to Keter, and Keter, which is divine will, it encompasses everything without really flowing directly into it. Right? Things like will, they relate to the whole system without actually becoming internalized. The way a thought, intellectual flow rather, becomes internalized, or a feeling like love becomes internalized, and you can say, yeah, it's here, it's stemming from this. Crowns function that way, and that's the same way that all the 10, call them attributes, in the animal soul function. They don't really flow into you in an internalized way. They kind of affect you from outside all at once. And more importantly, like a crown, they don't relate to something else. A crown sits on top, it doesn't come inside, it doesn't play with others, it rules, right? So when you're talking about the 10 attributes in the animal soul, they don't know how to combine and integrate. And that's because they come from an even higher world called Tohu, which I don't have to get into. But in Tohu, the supernal sphirot also don't inter-include. But that's for another class, right? But in our case, there's a difference between the way the attributes function in the divine soul, where they can inter-include, and Chesed can borrow from Gevura, right? And what does that mean? That means that when mom takes away the iron from me and I yell at her she's a bad mom, she's actually expressing Chesed. But Chesed is borrowing Gevura and saying a 4-year-old child should not hold a hot iron, right? So Chesed is expressing, really it's Chesed, it's loving kindness, it's taking care of your child. But Chesed is going, okay, Gevura, come over here, I need you right now, right? Take this out of the child's hand. Is the child screaming at you? Is the child unhappy? Yes, right? Show some strength, some Gevura. I'm the mother, right? I'm taking the iron away. I'm expressing love for the child. the divine soul knows how to do that, and every attribute can borrow from other attributes and combine so much that the attribute becomes a model of the whole and is even described as having a personality, a face. Yeah?
Getting back to what you said earlier, that the tense virility in self is a mirror image of the animal soul.
Yeah?
Why aren't they considered the same? Why are they considered evil and impurity?
Because it's a negative image, right? So there has to be some difference. Yeah.
But it's the same image.
It's the same image, yeah.
So why is one considered holy, one is considered evil and impurity?
I mean, the contrast is there so that we have free will. That's ultimately why the contrast is there. It's kind of like I could look at the police and I could look at organized crime and I could say, why is this one good and this one bad? They both have leaders, they both have rules, they both have guns, they both enforce things, they both try and make money, they both assert their will on the world. Why is one good and one bad? That's an axiom. What's good and what's bad? Protecting others, keeping law and order, that's axiomatically good. Stealing from people and hurting people for your own self-centered interest is axiomatically bad. I can't prove or disprove it. And in fact, the two organizations are very similar, right? And yet, one is obviously helpful and one is obviously a problem, right? So same thing plays out here. I can't prove to you that me stealing from somebody because I want something is bad, but that's an axiom. That part of myself that does that is what we call unholiness. It's self-centered. Whereas the part of me that takes my own and gives it to someone else who needs it, I can't prove to you that that is good. But axiomatically in our Torah, we're told tzedakah, when you can afford it, and even if you can, a little more than you can afford, perhaps, is good. Right? So that's the structure of the world, and it's there so that we have a choice to make. Right? If there was an other side, then I wouldn't have good and bad to choose from, and I wouldn't have a way to learn. Does that answer some of your question? All right. I'll give myself a C on that answer then.
Well, we can talk about later, but you said it's the other side.
Yeah.
Earlier you said it's not the other side, it's the identical side. They're identical, just one is better.
They're identical. They're a mirror image.
They're mirror image of
They're-
each other.
Yeah, but
So how can one, if they're a mirror image of each other,
Yeah.
how can one be good and one be bad?
you're nodding your head, Cindy. I'm getting something I'm not getting?
Well, it's the same way you have the sun and the moon, right?
No, those aren't mirror images of each other.
But they're the opposites, right? There's up and down, there's good and bad, and you
I
can't.
understand that
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah, but you have your divine image, right? Or your divine soul, which is like connected and attached to holiness, yes, to Ein Sof. But then you have to have another side, otherwise you wouldn't know from anything else. Like, how do you know happiness if you haven't known sadness? They work in tandem. It's a contrast. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, you remember, I think it was in Star Trek when Spock was replicated. He had an evil twin Spock. It looked exactly like Spock, but he was breaking everything. It's like that, right? Maybe let me think about your question. Let's talk about it after.
I could give one more explanation to maybe Richard understand. In your mirror image, your left hand becomes your right hand.
Okay.
So it's really the opposite, even though it's the same.
That's nice. I like that.
Agree?
Let's speak to that. So if we didn't hear, the question was, if the side of holiness and the other side are mirror images of each other, how is one good and bad? Shouldn't they be the same, both good? And the last comment was, in a mirror image, your left becomes your right, and so they become the opposite. Okay, yes.
In medicine, a mirror image of a drug can do totally opposite things.
Ah,
It's stereochemistry and then the reverse of it, and they can be totally same drug, but it's called the R and the L, but totally opposite, and that's what it reminds me.
very nice. Very good point, yeah. So we see it happening elsewhere as well. Good. Shehen Sheva Midot Ra'ot.
These 10 faculties are 7 evil midot, 7 emotional traits.
Okay, and before we go on, we did have a discussion about evil and the connotations in English versus Ra and the connotations, especially in the Tanya, which are very, very, very subtle. Right? When we looked in chapter 1 about about the definition of a Rasha, and we said somebody who does everything right and says everything right and thinks everything right and spends all their time trying to improve themselves, but for 10 minutes, they decide to play tic-tac-toe instead of learning Torah. Now they're a Russia, right? They had one little quiver of self-centered activity that was completely harmless, completely neutral. You'd think no big deal, and yet now suddenly they're in the category of a Russia. Because any subtle self-centered motion, no matter how subconscious even, actually still counts as as Russia. So when we say evil, it's not like the big evil villain in English. It's just still retaining some aspect of self-centered flow. That's all, no matter how subtle. So we're not, when you talk about the 7 evil midot, we're not talking about, midot that are trying to, they're not necessarily mean or trying to kill people. This is the part of myself that still, in some subtle way, is going in this direction, right? And like we said, if I walk by someone and they're hungry and I can't stand to see them sitting on the street hungry, so I give them $20, well, what was that part of me that couldn't stand to see them hungry, right? That part of me was doing it in this direction, right? I was doing a positive thing. I helped the person. I gave tzedakah. Now they got a sandwich, all good things. But there's some part of me that I had to look at that said, you know what? I couldn't stand to see someone hungry, and it was about me, not about them, right? So it's a very subtle system where we're working on examining that remaining self-centered flow, or that perhaps predominant self-centered flow, and looking at how it relates to the other centered flow, the nefesh elokit. And it gives us a few specifics, right? So in our mirror image, as you said, what'd you call it? Stereochemistry. A beautiful comment about how one chemical, medical.
So a chemical can be.
Hold on, they can't hear you on the camera, so you.
Oh my.
Oh my.
So part of the chemical could have things here, but then if it's reversed in the mirror image, they don't absorb in the body and do what they need to do the same.
And can do the opposite effect.
They could do but they have to absorb into something, and it's the opposite thing they absorbed.
All right. So they have
It is a left-right twist.
Good. So same thing here, right? When we have chesed in the divine soul, that comes out as kindness. That comes out as wanting to contribute, loving kindness. Chesed, when it is absorbed by the animal soul and flows out through one of the garments, it actually comes out as, and here he describes it, lust, right? Whether lust after food, lust after physical pleasures, lust after money, whatever it is, right? That's how the nefesh be'amit takes that attribute of chesed and uses it in a garment, right? So there's something similar I get about me wanting to give in an other-centered way, me wanting to help people, me wanting to contribute. But then the animal soul says, I want another $1 million. I want that car. I want that person. I want that house. I want that food, whatever it is, right? It's actually the same midah expressing, but on the one hand, it's flowing through the channel of nefesh elokit, and the second time it's flowing through the channel of nefesh behamit, right? So chesed, the same attribute, either soul can take it and run with it. And same thing we get in gvura. Whereas nefesh elokit will use strength, gvura, to help protect people around me, to have appropriate boundaries, to say, no, a 4-year-old can't play with a hot iron, take it away. Nefesh be'amit will take that aspect of gvura and will say, how come the world isn't matching my expectations? And we'll start yelling at people or throwing things or calling names or whatever, anger, right? So when you see somebody who is firm in an appropriate way to help people around them, that's gvura. When you see someone that's lost their temper and is yelling at everyone around them, that's also gvura. The key factor is, one is gvura of nefesh elokit, let me be appropriate with boundaries. The other is gvura of nefesh be'amit, let me assert myself because the world is, divine providence is not working the way I think it should be at this moment. Yeah? And then the third one we get tiferet, beauty or compassion, which here becomes boastfulness. I gotta learn why that's so. I don't quite get that correspondence. Why boastfulness? Does anybody have a read on that? Why boastfulness is the flip side of compassion? I'll call someone perhaps about that, bleed later, and see if I can.
It's just more of your ego. You got no bittul. It's all about you. So I'm the best. I'm boasting about myself.
Yeah, for sure. Boastfulness. I get why it's nefesh be'amit. It's ego.
Right.
But why specifically Tiferet?
Tied to beauty,
Yeah, why is it the opposite of beauty? And the same with anger is the opposite of restraint.
because it's an internal beauty.
I see. Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Joey. So we're asking why Tiferet, why boasting is the opposite of Tiferet. Tiferet is my internal beauty, which is there for me to share with others. And boasting is me saying, I'm so beautiful, look how beautiful I am, and projecting it outward. You answered the question very well. I like that. Habaot me'arba yesodot ra'im hanizkarim le'el.
Are we at the which stem?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Which stem from the four evil elements mentioned above? Spiritual entities have their elements as physical objects do. In this case, evil elements, since then is the soul of the Philippa.
So recall this a sidebar. The four elements, we heard about them in chapter 1, and the Nefesh B'amit stems from the four elements of the Sitra Achra, and it's earth, water, air, fire. We talked about their characteristics, and so these flow to become the 10 impure crowns, so to speak, of Nefesh B'amit. But we don't have to go too deep on the elements. V'sechel hamolidan hanechlak l'shalosh shehen chokhmah bina v'dat mekor hamidot.
And the intellect,
Seichel, yeah.
seichel, which gives birth to these 7 evil midot, which is subdivided into 3, chokmah, binah, and dat, the source of midot.
Right, so not surprising, in our negative mirror image, right, we have the 3 intellectual aspects, chokhmah, bin, and dat. But what is the difference here? Right, the similarity is that any emotional flow that I have in Nefesh B'amit now, we're talking about, this is the me stuff, this is the I want this is the someone hurt my feelings, this is the why can't I have whatever, right? Any emotional flow that I have, it still is born from an intellectual appreciation. Right? Every emotional flow is born from some intellectual kernel that precedes it, and that's because you can't feel something about something you don't recognize. Right? If there's some galaxy out in outer space that's so fascinating that we haven't found yet, I mean, I mentioned it, so now I'm kind of curious, but I don't have feelings about something I haven't encountered. Right? If there's some artist I've never heard of, a great African artist, and I just haven't been exposed to, I don't even know their name, I don't have any feelings about it because I haven't encountered it. The moment someone says to me, oh, have you heard of so-and-so? Now there's a little curiosity. Now maybe I'll start to feel something. And the more I'm exposed to it, the more I have potential to feel. I love it or I hate it, whatever it is. But you can't feel something until you have an actual intellectual contact with it, until you can recognize it. Things that you don't recognize, you don't have feelings about. So even in Nefesh B'amit, every feeling that I have, it has a parent, and the parent is the Seichel, Chokhmah, Bin, and Dat, that inspired that feeling. So that's where they're the same, but there's a big difference, right? Even though they're both parents and children, as Shais Taub says, in Nefesh Elokit, the parents are actually directing the children. In Nefesh B'amit, the children are running the house. Right? So yes, the parents created the children, but in Nefesh B'amit, the children then come back to the parents and say, oh, we need this, we want you to do this, figure out why we can do this. Because ultimately, while Nefesh Elokit is primarily an intellectual being that then can flow down and guide emotions, Nefesh B'amit, the bulk of it is the midot. The bulk of Nefesh B'amit is just feelings that fire, self-centered feelings and drives. And although they're born from the intellect, once those feelings fire, then they run back to Seichel and they say, Seichel, I need these 2 things. A, I need you to tell me how to get this thing that I want without getting in trouble, so figure that out for me. And B, I need you to find some framework where I can think about it without feeling guilty about it, right? So do those 2 things for me, right? And so Nefesh B'amit is just running, and you know, I want this, and I want that, I want to grab this, and I want to keep this person out of my life, and etc. And all Seichel's doing is running around providing Nefesh B'amit with A, the intellectual means to figure out how to get it without getting in trouble, and B, some way to think about myself where I think that I'm right and I shouldn't feel guilty. And that's called rationalization. Cover. Yeah, intellectual cover. Right? So Nefesh Elokit, the intellect is deciding what's right and wrong, is focusing on holy things, is focusing on Torah, is focusing on being a good person, and is creating emotions. Nefesh B'amit, the emotions are basically appearing and running the show, and then they're running to intellect saying, I want you to rationalize what I'm feeling, because I want it. Right? So there's a mirror imaging, but then there's a big difference in the order of operations. Yeah.
It's kind of like a child, too. I mean, you know, I want it and I want it now.
Yeah, that's exactly where he gets to now. A child desires.
Oh, sorry.
You've learned this before, have you?
No.
No? Ki hamidot hein lefi erech hasechel.
So where are we? The intellect,
Faculties, yeah.
right, the intellect faculties are described as the source of the evil midot, for the midot are commensurate with the quality of one's intellect.
Why don't you go on? Ki hakatan choshek ve'ohev dvarim ketanim pirutei ha'erech lefi shesichlo katan v'katzar lahasig dvarim yekarim yoter mehem.
The child desires and loves.
Good, okay.
He expresses his midah of chesed toward petty things of little value, for his intellect is too immature and deficient to appreciate more valuable things.
I don't know if you were here when we learned Sharif Vimana, there was a bit of a rebellion in the class when he started talking about children and their level and their... So he's not saying children aren't beautiful and innocent and amazing and important and that they know how to love in ways that we've lost. But two kids will fight over a little stick or over a lollipop or over something, and it'll become the end of the world, right? I mean, that's what he's talking about. We've all seen it. That a child will get attached to something that to an adult would be just take it or leave it, doesn't matter. And to the child, that's the most important thing in their life, and they will, come heck or high water, they will sacrifice everything for the sake of that thing, relationships, peace, harmony, sleep, whatever, right? So children, their intellect is at a certain level, it's developing, and so their intellect has them attached to things that, to a more mature person, seem perhaps petty, not the most profound or important things, right? So their chesed is still flowing. They have a lot of chesed, but the level of their intellect is saying chesed about a lollipop, right? Chesed about the color of the shoe, chesed about whatever, right? So we see that the quality of the midot are determined by the level of development of the intellect. And hopefully as we mature and we start to appreciate more profound things, now we start to have feelings about more profound things, and we'll leave aside the feelings about the more superficial things. And as our intellect develops, that continues, right? Maturity. וכן מתכעס ומתקצף מדברים קטנים וכן בהתפארות ושאר מידות. Similarly.
Similarly, with regard to the midah of Gevurah, he is angered and vexed by trivial things, and likewise with regard to boastfulness, which expresses the midot of Tiferet and other midot. The correlation between midot and intellect indicates that the intellect affects the nature and expression of midot, and for this reason the three intellectual faculties are said to be the source of the seven midot.
And so he's going through each of them, and he's showing in chesed, as an example, a child will experience love and deep attachment to things that maybe are of less value. Then in Gevurah, a child will get angry because their sister didn't let them use some little thing, or because they didn't get their way in some way, or because a TV show was canceled, whatever it might be. Something small that a mature person would just brush off. A child will now perhaps express anger, throw a tantrum, and same thing with boastfulness. And every midah, we can see from how the midah is expressing, how maturely and in what balanced way it's expressing. We can see where the intellect is, because the intellect is the one that determines and guides how the midot are flowing. ועשר בחינות הטמאות כשאדם מחשב בהן או מדבר או עושה.
Now, these 10 unclean categories, when a person thinks, thoughts originating from them, that is, when he thinks of ways of obtaining something he desires, or speaks words originating from them, or does an act which serves or expresses them.
Right, and just one point that I missed is very interesting. When in earlier in the book, when he talked about the 10 faculties, he said we have 3 intellectual faculties and 7 emotional faculties, in that order. If you notice on page 102, as he introduces them, first he says here, 7 evil midot and the intellect. So here, even as he says them, he talks about the midot first and intellect second in the chapter on nefesh b'amit. Right? And not by accident. The Alter Rebbe was very, very careful about every word and the order of the words. So he's showing us, even in the order, that when it comes to nefesh b'amit, the midot arrive first, and then intellect is there to just rationalize it after the fact. Yeah? So now getting to the garments. When any of these nefesh b'amit oriented midot express through thought, speech, and action, right? When I now decide to not just have them be who my nefesh b'amit is, but now I decide to let my nefesh b'amit do something, right? And nefesh b'amit may never change, right? This technique of trying to become a Beinoni doesn't mean that nefesh b'amit is not there. Maybe they're as strong as it ever was. I may not be the kind of person that can ever completely transform my nefesh b'amit, and that's fine. Some people were created that way, and we'll learn what the purpose of those people is. It's an important purpose. But I may never be able to transform that. And this is one of the pieces that the Alter Rebbe put this text out for, because there were so many people in Eastern Europe in his time that were working so hard at self-improvement. That was the whole drive of their life. And yet, I still walk down the street after Yom Kippur and Simchat Torah, and I still have the same silly thought that I have to brush out of my mind. Why can't I change who I am? Not everybody can. Not everybody can, but there's a purpose for the kind of person like me, for instance, who can't change who they are. And there's a technique where you differentiate between who you are and what you do, right? So Nefesh B'amit, it does have Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut of the Klippa, right? That is who I am. But that doesn't mean I have to let it do anything. I don't have to let it do anything. And doing activity means thought, speech, and action, including thought, even subtle thought, right? I don't ever have to let Nefesh B'amit have a sustained, subtle thought in my mind. I have complete control, and that's a choice that I'm making. So when we do that, when we let the attributes flow through thought, speech, or action, Hare machashavto shebemocho v'diburo shebepiv v'choach hamasi shebeyadav ushar evarav nikrim levushe mesa'avo le'eser b'chinot elu hatmeot.
From the thought in his brain, the words in his mouth, and the power of actions in his hands and other organs are called pure garments for these 10 unclean categories.
All right, so again, the word impure, we have all kinds of not helpful associations with that word, but this is just, it's not holiness, right? It's not completely other-centered, right? So they're somewhat self-centered. So that garment that I'm putting on, it has some egotistical drive still left in it, right? And when I put it on, now I'm wearing it. Now I've decided to put that garment on, whether thought, speech, or action. שמתלבשות בהן בשעת מעשה או דיבור או מחשבה.
Clothe themselves in the garments during the act, speech, or thought. But what sort of thoughts, words, and actions are the garments of the animal soul? Earlier in chapter 4, we learned that the divine soul has specific thoughts, for example, in which it clothes itself, namely thought, speech, and action, in matters of Torah and the mitzvot. Are we then to understand that the animal soul, too, has specific garments? Sinful thoughts, words, and actions, perhaps? Not so, says the Alter Rebbe. Presently, all thoughts, words, and acts that are not directed toward God and the service of God, even though they are not actually sinful, are garments of the kalipa, and hence of the animal soul.
So this is where we get to the definition of evil and the definition of sitra achra and all these terms we're going to use. And this is a really important piece to get our Tanya lens in focus, right? Because when he talks about sitra achra and evil and all this, yes, that includes war criminals and villains and diabolical people, but also includes very, very normal behaviors. It also includes really productive, helpful behaviors that still have any self-centered drive in it. And it includes all the neutral stuff in the whole world, right? there's a tree outside, right? Is that tree good or bad? What does that even mean? It's a tree, right? I could cut it down, I can make a spear out of it and go kill somebody. Or I could cut it down, I can make a sukkah, and I could do a mitzvah, right? Or I could leave it alone and just enjoy it, right? I could sit under it and learn Torah. Is it good or bad? It makes no sense. It's neutral, right? So that's part of the klipa. It's part of the sitra achra. It's part of the other side. But there's degrees and levels of the other side we'll learn about. But sitra achra means anything that is not holy, and that's all it means. So that is, like he said, all the deeds that are done under the sun. Right? V'hen hem kol hamasim asher nasim tachar hashemesh. These garments?
These garments of the animal soul comprise of all the deeds that are done under the sun. For example, all mundane acts.
Right? So nefesh elokit, that's when I'm truly other-centered, when I'm truly learning Torah, when I'm truly doing a mitzvah, when I'm truly engaging my tradition in that way, in a helpful way. That is thought, speech, and action of the divine soul. If it's not truly that, that's everything else. That's all the deeds done under the sun. Which means two things. One, it means look around you, everything that happens, it's the bulk of the world. It's just a generalizing principle saying most of the stuff you see. But also, deeds done under the sun has a spiritual connotation, and that is the sun is like the beginning of nature for the earth, right? I mean, all life, all light, all activity, it all comes from the sun, and then it flows, the energy goes into nature through the plants, etc., right? But there's stuff above nature. There's stuff that happens above that that has to do with holiness, spirituality, oneness. So those thought, speech, and action that have to do with the Ein Sof and total holiness and total unity, that is thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Be'amit. And everything else done under the sun, once you leave that aspect, now you're in nature, and now you're dealing with, there's a sun and a moon and an earth, and they're separate, and there's people, and they're living and they're dying. Things that have existence. Once I believe I have beingness, in the most subtle way, I've left perfect unity. Right? Remember, Ein Sof is not just, there's a piece of Steinsaltz I want to share with you here, right? Here's a good piece, yeah. Steinsaltz contrasts it with halacha. Sorry, I jumped around a little bit here. In halacha, there's things you must do. Maybe in Reform Judaism we say, we engage in them because they're productive, even if we're not halachically bound. There's things traditionally you shouldn't do. In our context, generally those are seen as counterproductive, and we try to avoid them. And then there's a whole area called reshut, which is just do it or not do it. Doesn't matter, right? Can I move this chair over there? It's my choice. Doesn't matter. No halachic reality, right? All those deeds that are done under the sun, halachically, it's an intermediary stage. When it comes to the spiritual lens, not the legal lens, all this stuff called reshut, it all moves in to the whole set. Not because it's destructive or evil, but because in this set, I think there's a me. I think there's a chair, right? I think there's beings that exist. The holiness side, the Nefesh Elokit side, realizes there's only one being here. That's all there is. There's only one being. And once I think I'm actually created and I've not completely nullified myself to that oneness, now I'm on the other side. And that's the essence of the Sitra Achar, the other side, is that once you've left a state of total oneness with the Ein Sof, even if you're a very productive being, a helpful being, a kind being, a giving being, because you're a you already have some aspect of Sitra Achra, right? You've already left it. So it's a very, very subtle distinction, and it includes all that stuff that's under the sun, right? That's all the domain of Nefesh Be'amit. Kind of getting a picture of this? Let me share a little Steinsaltz that I like. This is Steinsaltz, open in the Tanya, page 162. The world of holiness is a world of unity, a world that manifests the truth that there is none else beside him. The conception of God as the infinite, Ein Sof, does not merely imply that he is infinitely great, but that he is infinite being, with a capital B. Being without limit and definition. Being that embraces everything so that there can be nothing else. In contrast, the other side is rooted in the world of disunity, in which the light of the infinite is not manifest, so the exclusive reality of God is not recognized. Thus, the essence of Sitra Achra, the other side, is that there is, so to speak, something else beside him. In its initial, most basic form, the other side does not deny the existence of holiness, nor is it hostile to it. It merely deigns to define holiness, to confine it within a set of parameters. It is willing to accept the existence of a lofty and superior realm of holiness. What it does not accept is the exclusivity of holiness based on the assumption that there are other things of significance as well. So Nefesh Elokit, it's all about Ein Sof. And Nefesh Elokit is an actual piece of Ein Sof, and it has no intrinsic being. If it could reunite with its source, it would, and it would be gone. Nothing left, right? Just oneness. Nefesh B'amit, you may be saying, I want an ice cream. Good, you want an ice cream. What's the problem with that? Well, there's me, and there's an ice cream, so already I'm not holiness, right?
But don't we have that issue, you know, you come to services Friday night and you pray and you're involved in your feeling at one, and then you walk out and get a piece of 7-layer cake. So do you just like cancel out what you just did? I mean, you're now me-centric. I want that cake, and I'm thinking about it probably during part of the sermon, maybe. But I mean, there's always something in our lives that are going to counteract or bring it back to ourselves. I mean, I don't know how anybody could not. I mean, even having dinner. I mean, you're satisfying your own because you're nourishing yourself because you're hungry and you want food.
Yeah, so that's very common. What you're describing is very common, is that we have moments of oneness and unity, and then we hit life, and got to take care of myself. I like how this tastes. You know, oh boy, I'm going to buy this car for this car, and now I feel pretty good about myself. Like, that's life, right? What's wrong with that? And how do you avoid it? So that's once we get to chapter 9, that's the techniques that we learn is how do I say, okay, nothing wrong with eating that piece of 7-layer cake, 7-layer cake, perhaps. But, for instance, when I'm eating that cake, why am I eating it, right? I'm eating because it tastes good, and now I'm just lost in that, and it's just a sensory experience, and I'm enjoying the world for myself. It is. No one said that's a sin. You haven't gone out of legal area of reshut into an area of avera, right? If I'm eating food that corresponds to my kashrut, if I've done a blessing, if I do a blessing, whatever it may be, I could be having a very kosher experience and a very halachic experience, but it's an experience for me. So can I transform that? Can I say, I'm going to pause for one moment before I eat this cake. I'm going to consider this cake is being created by the Ein Sof. There's a spark in there. And once I eat it, what am I going to use that energy for? Am I going to use that to now greet people and make them feel good and talk to them about the service and help someone get to their car and help someone get home? And now the calories in that cake have been converted back to their source, and they become part of holiness. Because I have taken myself out of the equation, and I'm actually teaching a course on the diet of Kabbalah. Give me 2 pieces in that case, right? But things like that. What is my actual experience of eating the cake? Am I doing it because now I can help others? And good, it tastes good too. Let me enjoy that. That's a gift from God. I should enjoy the taste. Or am I doing it really because I like the taste of it? I've been waiting for it. Now's my time to have my cake, right? Things like that, where we learn to reprogram our experiences and reframe our experiences, can actually convert all that neutral stuff, which we're calling Sitra Achra, and elevate it to the level of holiness. And in fact, that's the Jewish pathway. That's why our highest spiritual moments are not going up to a mountain for a month and meditating, but are walking out of temple service and changing how I eat the 7-layer cake. Maybe very subtle, but it's very real. Let's begin to answer it.
So I think, and to add to that, it's the idea of not just learning Torah, but living Torah.
Yeah.
If you apply it to your mundane life and everything you do, then you're living it even when you walk out of the temple.
Absolutely. Yeah?
I'm kind of stuck on the word mundane that he put in here because just thinking about mundane life, some of it's mundane.
Most of it.
Mundane, yeah. So I'm not understanding the question.
It's not a negative, it's just what it is.
Just mundane means not holy. Like, when we leave Shabbat and we say, ben chol, it's called, right? When we leave holiness, we go into the week. The week is mundane. Week is great. I love weeks, right? Give me another week. That's life, right? But it's Shabbat. If Shabbat is holiness, and Shabbat is the time when we experience oneness with our family, with God, with Torah. Now you go into the week. I'm going to work. I'm having meals. I'm doing stuff. It's just mundane. Doesn't mean that it's not important.
Bad word.
Yeah,
It's not a bad thing.
it's not judgmental. It's almost it's a clinical, right? וכן כל הדיבורים וכל המחשבות אשר לא לשם המה לרצונו ולעבודתו. Oh, sorry. אשר הכל הבל ורעות רוח, וכמו שכתוב בזוהר, בשלח שהן תבירו דרוחה כולו. Which are all?
Which are all vanity and affliction of the spirit, as the Zohar, Parashah, Bashalach, interprets this, the ruination of the spirit.
Yeah, we'll glide over that one. That's a whole conversation. The sense is, Nefesh Elokit is into holiness, and now Nefesh Bamit can use mundane things to kind of like wear that away, right? So we want to focus on letting Nefesh Elokit run the show, and the mundane is there to serve it, not to drive it. וכן כל הדיבורים וכל המחשבות אשר לא לשם המה ולרצונו ולעבודתו. Similarly, all words and all thoughts that are not directed to God and to His will and His service are all garments for the animal soul. Right? So I would think, if I'm yelling at somebody, if I'm lying, that's the nefesh b'mit using my faculty of speech. Right? If I'm hitting somebody or I'm stealing something, that's nefesh b'mit using my faculty of action. Yeah, legally, that's true. Now I'm acting or speaking in a way that is halakhically problematic. But spiritually, if I'm just talking for the sake of talking, or because I like joking around and then people laugh and I feel good about myself, or if I'm just playing video games because it's a fun thing to do, I'm not breaking any laws, I'm not hurting anybody, and yet that is self-centered activity. The reason I'm doing it is because I like doing it. I like being the center of attention and making people laugh and they think I'm funny. I like playing video games because it gives me a rush of something, right? So non-problematic behavior, and sometimes even helpful behavior, can still be nefesh b'amit behaving, right? Sitra achra simply means the other side. It's just a general definition. You got holiness, as Steinsaltz said, which is there's only one being. And all these, how am I doing for time? Are we done?
5 minutes.
Okay. There's only one being, and ultimately, I have to surrender myself to that, and then I can experience or contact something of that oneness. But as soon as I'm not in that oneness, now I'm on the other side, right? Is it the other side killing somebody? Maybe. Is the other side playing a video game? Maybe. It's still the other side. It's just not holiness. That's all the definition is. So it's not judgmental like now you're an evil person. It's just, Sitra Achra just means something other than total oneness, total holiness.
Paul Yedlard used to talk about the I thou theory. That's what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Well, the I thou is this in the interpersonal, right? Or you can have I thou with a mountain. I get that, right? But the sense that when you encounter something else, you're acknowledging it and you're recognizing it as a garment of the Ein Sof, and I'm having an I thou moment because I'm saying, this is a spark of godliness talking to a garment of godliness, and we're experiencing oneness. There's not two of us anymore. Whereas what is it, you-it moment that he describes, that's where I'm checking out and the cashier's taking a little long and I snap at him, right? And this person's there just to serve my interests, and it's not really an extension of God, and I'm just talking to my own ego there, right? There is an I-it relationship. So very much, and Buber was pulling from Chassidus, so he drew from these sources specifically. Yeah, so the I-it relationship is where Nefesh B'amit is dealing with other beings that are separate, and they're there to serve my interests, maybe subtly. An I-thou relationship, Nefesh Elokit is now recognizing the holiness of everyone I encounter, and is having an experience of oneness. So exactly the same. Shezehu perush lashon sitra achra, perush tzad acher sheino tzad hakedusha. For this?
For this is the meaning of the term sitra achara, literally the other side, not the side of holiness.
Right? Sitra achra. When it comes to the word klipa, shell, there are levels and there are degrees, as we'll see. Right? You can have a walnut shell or a coconut shell, and you can have the peel of a grape, and they're very different. Right? So with shell, there's degrees and there's layers, and we'll look at those. Sitra achra, however, is just a general definition. Once you're not holiness, now it's everything else. And that's all nefesh b'amid at that point. ואין הקדוש ברוך הוא שורה אלא על דבר שבטל אצלו יתברך בין בפועל ממש כמלאכים עליונים. Now God,
I was trying to follow the Hebrew and you skipped the Israel.
oh sorry, בצד הקדושה אינו אלא השראה והמשכה מקדושתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא.
The side of holiness is nothing but the indwelling and extension of God's holiness.
Right, so this brings us to a bit of a question. Right, when we say the indwelling of God's holiness, right, hashra'ah of kedushato. So we ask a kindergartner here at Temple, where's God? What are they going to say? Everywhere. God's everywhere, right? So this is God, and this is God, and my feelings are God, and my thoughts are God, and the mountain is God, the universe is God. God's everywhere. You can't point away from God. God's everywhere. So how is it that God can have indwelling if God's everywhere? Isn't God just indwelling everywhere? Right? So God is everywhere, and everything is God. Right? That's a given. You can't get away from it. And yet, God's holiness is not necessarily manifest in everything. Right? My cell phone is God, but it's just a neutral tool, right? I could use it to do horrible things. I could use it to do wonderful things. God's holiness is not necessarily manifest there in an indwelling way. For that to happen, the thing has to nullify itself. And we learned about that. It's called bitul. Bittul, right? When I become a vessel and a channel for something that the Ein Sof needs to happen, like charity, or like learning, or like love, and if I do it not for my sake, oh, I'm going to give charity so that people think I'm a really great person, now that's me again, I haven't nullified myself. But if I genuinely do it from Nefesh Elokit, as purely as possible, get myself out of the way and become a channel, now, I was always godliness, like everything in the world, everything's God, but now it actually becomes manifest in me because I'm not there anymore. And that's what we mean when we say the indwelling, the Shekhinah, right? When something is nullified, if you walk into our sanctuary and you open the ark, there's many Torahs there, and every Jew looks at those Torahs and goes, oh, it's holy, right? It's just parchment. That could have been a shoe. How is that holy? And the shoe's also God. So how is that more God than this? It's not, right? It's because a shoe you could use for anything. It's just a mundane article. But a Torah, every person that touched it and that created it has taken it with the intention of allowing our tradition to flow into the world and has tried to nullify themselves, and that physical material is now out of the way and holiness is actually flowing through it. The physical Torah is actually in a state of nullification to the holiness that flows through it, according to Zohar. And the same thing is true of each of us. We have moments where we're out of the way and when productive energy is flowing through us, and that's where a person can actually have the indwelling of the Shekhinah. Or you have self-centered times when, give me a break, I'm out for number one, and now I'm blocking it. There's the me in the way. Now, look, kindergarten will still say, yeah, you're also God, right? Just like the cup is God and the light bulb is God. But you're looking at me, you wouldn't see it because I'm out for number one, right? And the sounds I'm making and the motions I'm making and the thoughts my brain are having, they're actually this direction. So now there's no indwelling of the Shekhinah. So the difference is not, is God there or not there? God's everywhere. The difference is, has the thing nullified itself and become a vessel for God's beingness to be manifest? Let's just go, just two more chunks, I think. Ve'ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu shoreh ela al davar shebatel etzlo yitbarech ben befoel mamash kemalachim elyonim.
Now, God dwells only on that which is surrendered to him, whether the surrender is an actual one and visible even in that surrendered being's external aspect, as is the case with the supernal angels, whose entire being is constantly and openly surrendered to God.
Oh, so we could spend an hour on that, right? We have angels, and we have all these ideas of angels from art and from cartoons, and they're pretty comical, right? But what is an angel? An angel is a disembodied emotion or intellect. So an emotion or intellect that does not have any physical form, that is completely surrendered to the Ein Sof, that is simply an outflow of the Ein Sof, that understands completely that it is just a ray from the sun and has no other identity. Right? So it's a completely abstract form, but as things become more abstract, they become more powerful, not less powerful. Right? Because an angel doesn't have a physical ear, doesn't mean it can't hear. Right? Here in the physical, if I lose the vessel, now the power for the vessel stops flowing in. I think without the vessel I can't hear. But we shouldn't make that mistake of thinking that above physical reality the same holds true. But no angel has a physical ear, but that doesn't mean they can't hear. That means they're not limiting the power of hearing to what a physical ear can hear, to what's in this room, to the frequencies that I can hear, etc. Right? So similarly, a disembodied intelligence, because it doesn't have a physical brain, doesn't mean it thinks less. It doesn't have physical thought, but it has a much broader intellect. Right? Much more abstract and powerful intellect or emotion. And the whole quality of those angels is that they know they're just godliness. There's no question. Right? They're completely nullified, and they're nullified not just emotionally and psychologically like we can manage, they're even physically nullified before God. So when a person sees an angel, whatever that looks like, I haven't, but when we hear of people seeing angels, they don't even know how to describe them. They have all this imagery that flows in. They're trying to share the experience. They're like, it was a throne, and it was this, and it was, I mean, it's craziness what they describe, because there's no physical form for them to describe, and yet they're encountering something, right? So all those angels, one thing they share in common is they're all nullified, even in form, out of existence, and they know there's only one being here. In our case, and we'll end on this one, Ben bechoach kechol ish Yisrael lemata shebechocho liyot batel mamash legabei HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'mesirat nafsho al kedushat Hashem.
Or whether it is a potential surrender, as in the case of every Jew here below in this physical world, who has the capacity for surrendering himself completely before God through martyrdom for the sanctification of God's name.
Right, and this is a potential, right? And this is considered the hallmark of being a Jewish person, is that you have the potential to surrender yourself completely for the sake of oneness, right? We all heard the stories of the Holocaust, where suddenly secular Jews, when they were at their end and met their horrible fate, they said the Shema, right? Or we've heard stories of people that lived a whole life, for instance, as a secular Jew, and then in the War of Independence gave up their lives. Let me not tell the story, I don't have time. But we each are told we have the capacity to actually surrender our lives for the sake of not being severed from this holiness. That doesn't mean we're expressing it, right? In mundane life, I can do all kinds of things, and I can be functioning just very, very counterproductively, say. But if I'm put in a situation, we're told this, and we see it in history, if I'm put in a situation where someone says, bow down to that idol, or I'll shoot you, or kill this person, or I'll kill you, or pressures us from the outside to do something that would absolutely sever us from our connection to God, suddenly something flares up, and there's this capacity to completely surrender everything, even our life, to not be separated, that may have been hidden our whole life. And it's that kernel of being Jewish, of total self-surrender, that we rely on and that defines us, and that we use to actually nullify ourselves even in a mundane way, right? And there's meditations we'll get to that can actually awaken that without, God forbid, being put in a situation of being in a Holocaust or someone saying, bow down to this idol, or I'll whatever, right?
Are you going to talk about this kind of?
Oh man, I had a whole plan, but we didn't get to the part. And I have I want to get to stuff just because it's never been me. I think it's so cool, but maybe we'll get to it later. And everybody, just have a look at this though. This is for next class because it won't be good anymore. This is like a fractal. This is a fractal kind of broccoli flower, whatever it is. And each piece, each little thing, is like a model of the whole thing. So look at the whole thing. It's one thing. You go into the one piece, that's another model. Another little one's a little model. Every point is a model of the whole thing. There's self-similarity throughout. So maybe just remember that for when the discussion comes up. Is the camera still running? I'm going to give a silent on camera to my broccoli flower. Here it comes! If you watch this long, you deserve this close-up. Thank you for watching at home. Here's the broccoli flower for next class. And see how it goes. Every little section is a model of the whole thing. There's self-similarity down in every dot. It's like a fractal. Have a good class. Thanks, everybody. This is just like sitting there making us all curious, the whole class. Like, why did I bring my...
What it was all about. I thought you had turned your etrog into something that I didn't know was possible.
No, I had a whole plan, but we didn't get to that point.